Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. It is Wednesday, March 26, 2025. It has been 315 days since we have started reading, with 613 pages complete of 628, meaning we have 15 pages left to go and a 97.61% of the way through Finnegans Wake. Welcome to episode 39 of Wake, the podcast that is just about to do the thing that no one ever thought it could do, including us, in fact, mostly us, who never really thought would ever actually fulfill a long-held bucket list item, reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once. I'm your host, Toby Malone, feeling like it's the last day of school or something, with the giddy excitement of getting to an impossible goal alongside the existential separation anxiety of coming to the end of something that really important to me. Joined as always by the man who always tends to finish the projects we work on together, TJ Young. Hi, TJ.
How's it going? I'm good.
I'm good. I just can't quite believe we're at the end. 15 pages to go.
I mean, we say this every time we come to the end of a project. We're like, oh, well, that's done. What's next?
Yeah. And I'm trying to sort of avoid the what's next of it all right now, just because I'm trying to enjoy the existence of the one that we're on right now. So rather than looking ahead to the next project, I'm enjoying a chance to enjoy what we've got.
Yeah, I do want to say that I remember we were asking each other what's next probably about a month and a half ago. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if we just got people to read like a sentence or two or three of the Wake and then like splice it together and like make a thing of everyone's voices, all these voices around the world. And then we heard that somebody was actively doing that. And I was like, well, I guess that the universe is like, you can stop. So
Yeah. I think your idea was slightly different to the version that we heard about, but
close enough to where I was like,
it also sounded like a lot of work that you'd proposed for us, and then when that came up, I thought, yeah, let's just leave it at Wake. Maybe we'll come back. And since this is our last reading episode, I still can't quite believe this is our last reading episode, because the first reading episode feels like about 10 minutes ago, and suddenly we're already at the end. There's no guest that we would rather have with us than the guest we have today. Neil is here. Neil Wechsler, welcome back for your record-breaking, I think, 7th episode of Wake or something. Oh, yeah, but you've
Night Lessons was 3 episodes.
That's it, yeah. In terms of episodes, yeah. So welcome back, Neil.
So happy to be here. You guys are the best, and yeah, no people I'd rather finish this off with than you guys. So
absolutely. I remember very clearly, because I think we'd recorded 1 or 2 episodes, and I reached out to you for some other reason. I remember mentioning in an offhanded way, oh, by the way, I've got this podcast you might be interested in. We're doing Finnegans Wake. And I think you're in Buffalo and I'm in Toronto, and I think I could hear you falling off your chair from here saying, that's my favorite book, right? How did you not know that? And so all this time later, this is, I think you were on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is your 7th episode with us. And so, yeah, it sort of feels like you're part of the furniture, like you've always been here. And so I can't believe we didn't start with you in mind.
Well, but that's one of the fun things I think that this is doing, right, which is it's connecting old friends, new friends in different types of ways, and we can never know. This is a good intro to the book, right? You can never know quite as much as you think you want to know or don't want to know about people around you. So anyway, I think that the this idea of bringing people together, and again in both ways that you may have expected, should have thought you should have known, and don't expect.
Yeah.
It's such a cool intro to the book too, which has all these layers of that human connection.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing to me, because obviously I'm very familiar with your plays, having worked with you a lot on a lot of your work, and and it's clear to see the influence in a retroactive way. You look back and go, oh, okay, knowing Neil's plays, I can see the influence, the same way that you can see Joyce's influence on Beckett when you read Crapp's Last Tape or Not I or anything like that. It's very clearly influenced by Joyce, but it's easy to sort of see things as monolithic and not influenced by anything else until you see them in contrast with one another. And so it was really nice to learn a little bit more about your process by learning a little bit more about Joyce.
Yeah, and it's totally brings me back to that too. I mean, I can remember the first spot where I read the first words of this, and also I had read certain pieces separately, and so I just, in terms of my own way of thinking about the world, yeah, it was just so largely shaped around by Joyce and Beckett and their relationship, and then this piece so centrally really is, in some ways, the centerpiece in terms of their connection and in terms of where Beckett decided to go in a different direction, largely because of this work, right? So, I mean, for me, this is so central to just how world literature evolved, and obviously it's just one type spot of it, but for me it was like the spot, right, to focus on. So that's why it's strange in that sense too, because it connects to all of my own experiences as a writer and as a thinker, and all the ups and the downs and all those things too. So it has that extra weight, which I'd largely kind of put aside. So when you came back, it was like, oh, I got to go back. I got to relive all that trauma again.
Well, we were talking before we started recording about how the Wake is something you can come back to over and over, and it's not necessarily something you need to use as a guiding light for every day of your entire career, but it's something you can come back to. I mean, do you find that your interaction with the Wake changes as you get older or as you've spent time away from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you said it perfectly. Like it is so central to the way I think about the world, right? In terms of the relationship between words and the world. And I just think that words are our closest relationship with the world. I mean, at least in terms of an internally, right? Outside of like human to human connection, but the way we think about it, which will of course affect the way we think about other people, right? So to me, words are just so important, and like no book is a better place for me in terms of thinking about that. So in terms of how you go back to it, yeah, I can go 3 months or 6 months or before you guys reached out. There have been stretches of a year or 2 years where I may not have any like interaction with it at all. But then of course I'll see it on my shelf and like maybe I'll pull it out, maybe I'll read a thing. There's still parts of it that I know so well, but this has sort of brought it back in. So yeah, I think beyond me, like we kind of were talking about like what's the purpose of like the podcast? What's the purpose of talking about this book? I think this is something that everyone should take a dive into. I mean, it's such an important piece of like human creation, civilization. I mean, when we think about like, especially at a time like now, we're starting to slip away from like, is the Matrix coming soon, right? Like we're like, how soon are we going to be irrelevant? Like this to me is the type of thing that are like, where I'm kind of like, okay, here's this thing, show me that we're irrelevant, right? Like, I mean, there's this line that reminds me of someone, this Dostoevsky scholar had this great line about Dostoevsky basically saying, acknowledging all the problems with Russia over the just like he's like, for everything that Russia has done awful things, like all I've got to say is look what we put forward, right? And he said it in this really poetic way, and was at a really rough time, I think, in Russian history when he put this out. It was maybe early 20s, some spot where he was really trying to defend his like people in the world. And so like what I think he said about Dostoevsky for Russia specifically, Joyce certainly for Ireland, but it's beyond Ireland. I think it's Joyce. It's like this work for because it brings together all these different languages too, right? So there's this sense in which it's like, it's such a touch point for human civilization. I mean, not to overstate that maybe, but like to me it is like, it has that kind of effect. But without, and this comes, I'm sorry, now I'm rambling again, but
we love it. Drink.
You often say a thing about like that. What I just said seems like, oh wow, what the purist piece of it. I don't see it as a purist. To me, like the purists, and of course, probably I'm lumped in maybe with the purists, but I think they've kind of taken us like often in the wrong direction with this, because it becomes, by turning it into a purist thing, it becomes less a thing for everyone, and it becomes more something for like just an elite that can analyze. And I think ultimately it's something for everyone. This is some, and I think so. It's a distinction. Maybe there's a branch of the purists. Maybe this is my branch, where I think it's purist in the sense that everyone has this element of purist in them, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you explore and think through these things in your relation to words, everyone can kind of maybe connect to that. But again, yeah,
That's okay. We can point. We can just. Yeah. We'll just lead the neo purists. That
that has a bad ring. I don't know about that ring, the neo purist.
Maybe, that's true.
That sounds even more like. I think we just gotta. Yeah, that's my goal with you guys is to come up with a new word for purist. Or,
Toby just proved that he does not live in America. So
that is true. That is true.
Yeah, I want the neo piece.
Don't put that on a t-shirt. Yeah, that's all right. Fair enough. Okay, we'll workshop it. So so I mean, I'm sure. Did you think when I first pitched this idea and we were 3 episodes in and we were 40 pages in? Did you think we'd make it this far?
Yes, because I had faith in you guys. I mean, that's an interesting. I had faith in you guys ultimately that you were going to do it. But I think what's interesting, and this is you can, of course, 2 of you can talk about this, is I feel like it's probably changed you in terms of how you think about it and how you think about, like, even though you probably knew you were going to finish it too, because that's just who you guys are, but like you probably didn't know you were going to finish it in the way you finished it, or that it would take the path you
100%, 100%. And I think for me is that I talk about this a lot, is that I had to get over the fact that I'm going to be frustrated with it, right? And that in academia we read for understanding in a way that this book asks you not to sometimes, and to just let it happen. But also, the number of people, we actually thought that we'd be operating in a silo for the majority of the time, but the number of people that we've met through this and we've had bonus episodes with and connected with has been kind of extraordinary. It was actually one of the things I talked to Toby about. I was like, Toby, at some point in time, we have to say no, because, the well of people kept coming up, and extremely grateful for them. But we're also, there's a stretch of time there where you'll see that we hadn't done a reading episode in a while, and we're like, we have to focus on the goal. But the fact that we're not siloed, the fact that there is a community, the fact that I have tons of new Instagram and LinkedIn friends from this podcast who are responding to the work that I do outside of this in theater is really heartening, right? But the other fact of it is, I didn't expect to walk away from this with lines that just jump out to me and reach like my level, my poetic sensibilities, right? And I mean, when I say my poetic sensibilities, I grew up watching Def Jam poetry at 11 o'clock at night, right? Kanye West before he was crazy and before he got a record deal and was standing up and doing slam poetry and things like that. But there's still even that richness that has permeated into that sort of subculture as well is apparent in the book. And I didn't expect that. I had found that type of work, and I had found that type of connection in like Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man and, things like that. And I didn't expect that level of truthful, like soulfulness in this.
Yeah, it was a text that I assumed was going to be challenging and difficult and frustrating, all that sort of stuff. Having read things like Infinite Jest and going, okay, well, I've slogged through that thing, and a lot of people love that, and there's enough in that you can hold on to it and get through. Whereas I knew that this was kind of sort of the grandfather of Infinite Jest without any of the humor, or without any of the accessibility, at least. I mean, there's plenty of humor, but the impression that I got when I talked to you first about this, Neil, is that it's kind of this is a terrible analogy, but I remember years ago, a friend of mine, it was after Breaking Bad had finished, and I hadn't seen it yet, and a friend of mine I said, I think I'm going to start watching Breaking Bad, and they were like, I'm so excited for you that you get to discover that fresh. I'm envious of that chance to see this for the first time. And they were right. I got to discover it and live in that world for the 7 seasons and really really take that on and realize that there is a monumental thing out there that I haven't experienced, and now I get to experience it. And so I got that same feeling from The Wake, where you were essentially saying you're in for a treat. It's going to be hard, but you're in for a great treat. And I think you were right. I think at the time it becomes, and the reason why everyone quits on page 16, I think, is because people get there and they go, but there's so much more to go, and this has been hard so far, so it's only going to get harder. And it does get harder. Book 2 is insane. So the fact that we took this on has, and I appreciated the boost of confidence that you gave us in book 1 when you first came on in 1.5 when you did the Mama Festa chapters, and really brought a real legitimacy to the podcast. We went, hey, look, we've got someone who knows what they're talking about. Our most eloquent friend.
Toby, when you said, people leave after page 16, it reminds me of the couple of times where you watch a movie and you're like, I'm good, and you could just stop,
Yeah.
right? But this is something that we're like, no, we're dedicated to watching this all the way through. Yeah. I often think about the amount of times that we can, our ability to just quit media, right? Like we can just quit media. We could just stop. And I also think about the fact that when this was written and when this was published, the amount of media that we consume, more media in one day than people did in like their lifetimes. It's just coming from all places. So also this challenge of like, if this is what you're going to take it on, feels more in line to then as it does to now. So I think it is a greater accomplishment to push through it now, because we could turn to the next thing in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah. And it's really, I mean, again, just repeat this point. I think it's so important to bring this particular thing back in the way you're talking about, right? I mean, I think like certain things from the past that were great at one point, or were regarded as great at one point, and you look at them now, you're like, yeah, but it feels like a kind of piece for a time. This is not a piece for one time.
No,
like as long as people have thoughts and words, this will resonate. If you make, and it may resonate in different ways, but like I think it's impossible to go into this with any kind of open heart, open mind, and not find something relevant for you. It may take some time, but like this is,
Yeah, and I feel very, very proud that this podcast maybe helps perpetuate that conversation a little bit in different areas. And maybe we have some people who had taken on other parts of Joyce who were scared of the Wake, who came to take this on in a fairly accessible kind of way, and to realize that, oh, if these idiots can do it, then maybe we can do it too. Or, I've always said, if you've listened to all of the podcasts, you've read the book. You maybe haven't read the book in the depth that Neil's read it, but that's okay, because there's no right way to read it or wrong way to read it. And so we've got a lot of people who have come on to guest and have started out trepidatious and got to the end and said, I'm going to go and buy my own copy now and read this whole thing because this is so exciting. So that's great.
I think about, Neil, when you said open heart and open mind, this feels like the type of book that, and this is going to be controversial, hold on, should not be required reading in an English class. You know what I mean? Because there's something that's stifling about the fact that I am required to read this thing in class in this certain way, that there's tons of books that I love now that when I was assigned them in class, I was like, I don't want to do this, But this is something that I feel like you have to approach with that willingness to dive in.
Which, I mean, this opens up this huge thing, which is, maybe it's because the way we think in terms of academia and English classes, we too often, like, that's what I said earlier when I was like, it's too bad that this is lumped into the academic purist trap,
100%.
right? Because that's like, and then, so then you're taking it even to like at the level of assigning it for class. Now, I'd love it for be on the shelves of, English classes and like, hey, kids, today, walk around, take 10 things off the shelf, find your own thing, right? I mean, I think it's that exploration piece that's huge, right? And then you find the few kids who like, oh, I want to go further, then maybe they influence a friend, but it has to feel more organic. And I think, again, so it's true of the way, but it's really true of the way our literary culture has kind of evolved. It's like it's a good window into that. And again, how the way you guys are approaching it, it's outside of that academic setting, but not in a kind of flippant way. I mean, of course there are elements of that, but like ultimately you are trying to figure out modes of engagement for people who may not have had that pathway otherwise, right? So that's why it's cool. But I think
Absolutely.
we're tooting.
No,
Let's get. I'm excited because now it's like we gotta finish this.
Yeah,
off, right?
but before I had one thing that I wanted to bring up really briefly, and just because I've been saving it till today because you're here, Neil, is that I've been doing all sorts of reading in sort of preparation for episodes, and I keep stumbling across little bits and interesting things, and I found this one thing which I found so fascinating and so important that we have never really talked about on here, is the fact that the world's largest collection of James Joyce material is in Buffalo, where you are. The Joyce collection at the University of Buffalo is there, and it's this massive collection. And just to give you the quick summary from the collection's website, and I'll link to all this in the show notes. James Joyce collection came to UB in 6 installments, the first in 1950 by virtue of a gift from Margarita F. Wechsler, made in memory of her husband Philip J. Wechsler. The Wechsler gift consisted of the Librairie La Hune's Paris Joyce exposition, which featured a substantial body of his manuscripts, the family portraits of Joyce's great-grandparents and grandparents, Patrick Tuohy's portraits of Joyce and his father, and other items of memorabilia. But most importantly, another extraordinary part of this gift was Joyce's private library, received in the same condition as when it was packed to storage after Joyce left Paris to flee the Nazi occupation. And this is in Buffalo, New York.
Yes. So I've had not a lot of interaction with this, but I did back in, I think it was 2016. I was asked to talk at Finnegans Buffalo, which was kind of like Irish in film, but it wasn't just that. It wound up being just. But the thing I was asked to talk about, it was Beckett centered, and I talked about the thunder words, and the paper I presented was the thunder words in Finnegans Wake, and how they connected to the abbreviated thunder words in Beckett's Watt. So we went from the 100-letter thunder words to Beckett's Haw and letter, and how it their trajectory. And part of that, there was a panel with some Joyce and Beckett scholars from UB. So that was, and then they were connected to what you're talking about. So there was some discussion of that, but beyond that, not much. But that was a point where I did intersect with that, and who knows, maybe this will lead to something here. We could one of the follow-up events for the Wake podcast could be an appearance. We bring you guys into Buffalo. I don't know, something.
Absolutely,
right?
we will definitely do that in 3 years and 10 months.
Oh, come on!
No, it's fascinating. I mean, and it includes a lot of stuff, including Joyce's manuscripts, like all of his notebooks, like the notebooks with all of the annotations for when he was writing Work in Progress / Finnegans Wake, and it's just there in Buffalo. I find that so cool that it's there, and obviously you're one of the great champions of Buffalo, of everyone I know, who you're not from Buffalo, but you have settled there, and you're such an advocate for the community there, and so I just love that we have that synchronicity.
Right, and what's just so strange is I'm working there right now. I'm just working with some students in Grenadine VR, actually, just an independent study thing. So it's like I'm there. It's strange that but that's what can sometimes happen with these silos, right? It's what we were talking about before. Like these things can be happening literally like next to where you're working, but because of the way we think sometimes about these things, is they're so pocketed that it doesn't have the same intersections with the community and with other pathways other than the ones where it's like if you're not on this path, then forget it, because so that's something that, again, that's a broader conversation. But I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, it could be. I could see that being one of these follow up to this the podcast.
Yeah.
Once it's over and you can't live with the fact that it's over, you can come to Buffalo and
we'll do a Q&A for 3 people. It'll be amazing. So we're moving into our very last section, and to do this, ordinarily I break up the sections by paragraph breaks or section breaks, or sometimes the hated Oxford World's Classic give us a breaking in between sections. So I can do that pretty easily, but with this last section, I really struggled to find my breaks. So I turned to Neil to break it down. How did you find breaking up? Because the last section, this is the section that you've rhapsodized about as being the greatest section in the history of the English language. I thought, how do I break this up? So I thought, if I'm going to make anyone break it up, I'm going to make you do it. So how was your process for that?
Well, yeah, and so it's essentially the last 15 or so pages that we're doing, and I think the first few, as you mentioned, there are those paragraph breaks, but once you get into those final 10, it's really
it just goes.
It just goes. And so, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, I base it on like two factors. One would be like, well, we have to alternate this. There has to be a certain rhythm to the alternating. And then once I got to a rough spot where that could be like the half page or so where it made sense to make a transition, it was finding like a vocal kind of beat
right
that could transition, right? So there's nothing. I'd like to say that there was something truly profound in my approach there, but it was really just about those two factors.
And particularly when we get into that last 10 pages, we're going to try to maintain the rhythm of the paragraph and just pick up from one another as we go. So hopefully it won't be too disruptive. As always, we're reading from the Penguin Modern Classics edition of Finnegans Wake, published in 2000 with a foreword by Seamus Dean. Today we'll be reading the second part of chapter 4.1, the final chapter in the book, from pages 613 to 628 in this edition. In the infinite wisdom of the geniuses at the Oxford World's Classic, there is no overview of this last section, only more weird, useless analysis that we'll hear at the end of the reading, but the gist is this: we are at the end. We'll find out how the Oxford World's Classic can wring all the fun out of that at the end of the reading. And we're not going to rush. We are going to make the most of these last 15 pages. I'm excited to get going. And now, without further ado, Finnegans Wake. Yet is no body present here, which was not there before. Only is order othered, naught is nulled, fuit fiat. Lo, the Lord of Laurens now aurealizing benedictively, when saint and sage have said their say. A space of calypthrous gloom, involucrumines the Perinathean amenta, fungo algaseous, muscofelicial, graminopamula plantion, of increasing liviviorius, feelful thinkamelinks, luxurialitating every whence whithersoever, among skull hollows and charnel cysts of a weed waste world wevelled, when Ralph the Retriever ranges to jaw road his nuts knuckles, and her thies thighs, one gulp down of the nauseous four-air barkfarst's oboe boom around, and you're as paint and spick-span as a rainbow. Wreathe the bowel to rid the bowel, no rancure, no rank heat, sir, a mess in amulium chlorid cup. Health, chouse, endless necessity, arrive, licky puggers, in a poke. The fulgor of the fright fools is olympically optimonious. There is bound to be a love-leg day for mirages in the open. Murnane and Aveling are undertoken to bury that orchard, provided that. You got to make good that breech suit, Seamer. You going to home port home, toiler master. You yet must get up to kill, non-particular. You still stand by and do as hit, private. While for yous, Jasminia, Aruna, and all your likers, affinitively must it be by you elected if Mono Gines his is, or hers Dianda, the tubus, limbosum, and nectarial. Owned or graze heifer, Ethel or bonding, Mopsus or Gracchus, all your horridities will be incessant lament, be coming back from the Enon wish-wash whos, Orme Pierre Lodge, Dune of the Droons, Blanches bountifully, and Night's End made up, every article lathering, leaving several rinsings, so as each rinse results with a dapperant roll, cuffs for meek and chokers for chic, and a kink in the packs for Namby. Forbear, for naught that is his bane, in morning's lawn. Themes have thimes and habit reburns, to flame in you. Ardour, vigour, forders, order. Since ancient was our living, is impossible to be, delivered as Kaffirs and culls, and once again overalls, the fittest survivor lives that blued, iron, and storage can make them. Witches all claims, clean. Wenast cleeps, close. And the Mano Miller clipper clappers, noxed, doze. Fincents, a warn. Tuck up those wide shorts, the pink of the busket for sheer give. Peeps, stand up to hard wear and step into style. If you soil may puet guet me preves. For Newman Morm set a marge to the merge of the notions. Inintion one's a game.
What is gone? How it ends? Begin to forget it. It will remember itself from every size, with all gestures and each our word. Today's truth, tomorrow's trend. Forget. Remember. Have we cherished expectations? Are we of liberty to pervasiveness? Why after? What for where? A plain plan, laphism, assemblements, Eblani's conglomerate horde, by dem delti deva. Forget. Our whole mole mill willing, ficolometer, a tetradrama national gaze g- gaze bocration, the Mamaluja, known to every schoolboy scandler, be he Matty, Marky, Lukey, or John Adonk. Auto Kinkatonaskali, pre-provided with a clapper coupling, smelting works, ex-progressive process. For the farmer, his son, and their homely codes, known as egg burst, egg blend, egg burial, and hatch as hatch can, receives through a portal vein and dialectically separated elements to precedent decomposition for the very pet purpose of subsequent recombination, so that the heroicisms, catastrophes, and eccentricities transmitted by the ancient legacy of the past, type by tope, letter from letter, word at word, with sentence of Sundance, since the days of Pliny and Columcellus, when Cynthia Pervenchi and Margaret swayed over the all too ghoulish and illyrical and enumeratic in our mother nation, all anastromosically assimilated and pre-identified para-ideological ideologically, in fact, the same old game bold atomic structure of our Phineas the Old One, as highly charged with electrons as Hofazards can effective it, may be there for you, Coccolora Laura Lominius, when cup, platter, and pot come piping hot, as sure as herself pits hen to paper and their scribbling scrawled on eggs.
Of cause so, in effect as, dear, and we go on to dirt dump, reverend, may we add majesty. Well, we have frankly enjoyed more than anything these secret workings of nature's, thanks ever for it. We humbly pray, and well was really so denighted of this light's time. Muck's rats which bring up about Weckers, they will come to no good. Yon clouds will soon disappear, looking forwards at a fine day. The honourable Master Sarmon, they should be first born like he was, with the two hangled warpon, and it was between Williamstown and the Mary and Aylesbury on the top of the long car, as merrily we rolled along. We think of him looking at us yet, as if to pass away in a cloud. When he woke up in a sweat beside us, it was to pardon him, Goldilocks, me having an airth, but he daydreamed we had a lovely face for a pull to mine. Back we were by the jerk of a beam-start, backed in Paladay's last, on the brinks of the Wobblish, the man what never put a dram in the swags but milk from a national cow's. That was the prick of the spindle to me that gave me the keys to dreamland. Sneakers in the grass, keep off. If we were to tick off all that Kaffler's head whispers for his accommodation, the meat craws namely, and their bacon what harmed butter, its margarine oil, Thin, 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 stringly it is forbidden by the honorary 10th commandment, to shall not bear full sweetness against a neighbor's wiles. What those slimes up the cavern door around you keenan, the lies is coming out on them frecklefully. Had the shames to suggest, can we ever? Never. So may the low forget him their trespasses. Against Moloid O'Reilly, that huggled Betty fan, now about to get up, the hardiest that Kulak ever, a not Irinish man called Ervigzen by his first mate. May all similar doubters of our old Hames story have that fancy's widming. For a pipe of twist or a slug of Hibernia metal we could let out, and by jing, someone would make a carpus of somebody with the greatest of pleasure by private shootings. And in contravention to the constancy of chemical combinations, not enough of all the slatters of him left for Peter the Picker to make their thrice 70 filths of a man out of. Good wheat, how delitious for the 3 Selvins of Dulcie, and what a sell-price guest, the 2 Paris of Monachina, sugars of lead for the Chlora's ashpots peace, he possessing from a child of highest valency, for our privileged beholdings ever complete hairy of chest, hamps and eye bags, and a pursuance to sales ladies' affectionate company. His real devotees, wriggling reptiles, take notice, whereas we exgust all such sprinkling snigs, they are pestituting the whole time, neverwithstanding we simply agree upon the committee of amusance, or could about bring under same notice for it to be able to be seen. About the chorogenal Hun and his knowing the size of an egg cup. First he was a skulksman at one time, and then Clunes fired him through guff. Be sage about sausages. Statistic shows what he's hiccups of teatables. The old firm fat spitters are most eatenly appreciated by Metropolonians. While we should like to drag attentions to our Wilksman's come sensation act, the magnets of our midst being foisted upon by a plethorus of parachutes. Did Speece permit the bad example of a setting before the military to the best of our belief in the earliest wish of the one in mind was the mitigation of the king's evils, and how he stared up the step after the power of the gate. He giant stand of Manunone, no Brad wishy-washy wathy wanted neither. Once you are ballad-proof, you are unperceivable to Haley icy and missile throws. Order now before we reach Rugger's Rush, as we now must close, hoping to St. Lawrence all in the best. Moral. Mrs. Storrs Humphreys. So you are expecting trouble, Pondups from the domestic service questioned. Mr. Storrs Humphreys. Just as there is good and even, Levia made cheek is a complete blink. Plum, meaning 1, 2, 4, fingers up the hind hose of his R's, whereupon our best again to 111 plus 1001 other blessings will now conclude thus ye puzzles to your great kindest well, for all at trouble to took. We are all at home in old Fintona, thank Dennis for our self's sake, that direst of house bonds will weal be true until love sends so long as we has a pockle full of brass. Impossible to remember persons and improbable to forget position places. Who would pillow his head off to conjure up a, well, particularly mean stinker like fun make called Foon McCraw, brothers, mystery man of the pork martyrs, Forson Girish, Tomothy and Lorcan, the bucket toolers, both are Timsons now, they've changed their correcticals during their blackout. Conan Boyles will pludge the day lives out through him if they are correctly informed. Music meowed Stroh, please. We'll have a brand rehearsal Fing, one must simply laugh. Fingamaging, good lick, swell, this ought to weak him to make up. He'll want all his fury gut murderers to redress him. Gillian, the Gap, the big bad old sprowly old futtering foon, has now stuffed last podding. His funeral will sneak police by creeps o'clock Tuesday. Kingen will come in, also brew beer. Penn's picture at Mansham House, Horse Garden show. In Morning Post as from Boston Transcript, Femels will be pre-adamant as from 28 to 12 to hear that love-laid parson of case of a bald gentle male pour further moracles. Don't forget, the grand funeral will now shortly occur. Remember, the remains must be removed before 8 hours sharp, with earnestly conceived hopes. So help us to witness to this day to hand and sleep. From of Maaz days most dutiost.
Well, here's lettering you erroneously anent other clerical fans alleged herewith. I wished I wast be that dumb tyke, and he'd wish it was me yonder heel. How about it? The sweetest song in the world? Our shape as a juvenile being much admired from the first with native copper locks. referring to the Married Woman's Improperty Act, as a correspondent paints out that the Suisse Auburn Vogue is hanging down straight, fitting to her innocent eyes. Oh, Felicius Culpos, if all the Macawrals could only handle Virgils like Arms Works Limited. That's Hansel for Goethals. Never mind Mickelmans, chat us instead. The cad with the Pope's wife, Lily Kinsella, who became the wife of Mr. Sneakers for her good name in the hands of the kissing solicitor, will now engage in attentions. Just a princh for tonight. Pale bellies our mild cure, back and streaky 9-pace. The thick, soft Bully's Acre was got up by Sully, the Boot Lane Brigade, and she had a certain medicine brought her in a licensed victualler's bottle. Shame. Thrice shame. We are advised the Waxy is at the present in the Sweeps Hospital, and that he may never come out. Only look through your letterbox one day with PCQ about 4:32, or at 8 and 22.5, with the Court of Scissions Masters and Clark and the bevy hum of Marie Reparatrices for a good all-round simp Powderix purge. Full view, to be surprised to see under the grand piano Lily on the sofa, and a lady pulling a low, and then he'd begin to jump a little bit to find out what goes on when love walks in beside the solicitor's business by kissing and looking into a mirror. That we were treated not very grand when the police and everybody is all bowing to us, when we go out in all directions on Wantalon Road with my Cubularo glide. And personably speaking, they can make their bow to my ouse, as Hilary Allen sang to the Open Nine Nighters. Item. We never were chained to a chair, and bite 'em. No widower whathersoever followed us about with a fork on Yanks killing day. Meet a great civilian, proud lives to him, who is gentle as a mushroom and very affectable when he always sits foremost for us for his wet while, to all whom it may concern. Sully is a thug from all he drunk, though he is a rattling fine bootmaker in his profession. Would we were here ether to lodge our complaint on Sergeant Larrissony, in consequence of which in such steps taken his health would be constably broken into potter's pants, which would be the change of his life by a Noel Welshin which has been ox-belled out of his Crispianity. Well, our talks are coming to be resumed by more polite conversation with 100% human over the natural bestness of pleasure after his good few mugs of humberdum and shag. While for whoever likes that urogonal pan of cakes, one apiece, it is thanks, beloved, to Adam, our former first Finlater, and our groceress Churcher, as per Griffith's variations for his beautiful cross-mess parcel. Well, we simply like their dem cheeks, the Rathgarys, wagging here about their rhythms and in me amphibid, and he being as bothered that he possibly could by the 4th of Hampty Damp. Certified reformed peoples, we may add to this stage, are promptly saying to quite agreeable deef, here gives your answer, pigs and scuts. Hence we've lived in 2 worlds. Here's another, he what stays under the himp of Hulth. The here-waker of our hame fame is his real namesame, who will get himself up and erect, confident and heroic, when but young as of old, for my daily come freshenal, a wee one, woos.
Alma Luvia Polabella. P.S. Soldier's Rollo sweetheart. And she's about fed it up now with nonsery reams, and rigs out in regal rooms with the Ritzes. Rags, worn out. But she's still her decuman amber too. Soft morning, city. Lisp. I am leafy spurfring. Lupf. Flotty and flotty. All the nights have fallen on to long my hair. Not a sound falling. Lispin'. No wind, no word. Only a leaf, just a leaf, and then leaves. The woods are fond always, as were we their babes in. The robins in crews so. It is for me golden wending. Unless away. Rise up, man of the hooths, and have slept so long? Or is it only so meslims on your pondered palm? Recline from cape to petty, with pipe on bowl, tress for a fiddler, sixth for make merries, none for a coal. Rise up now and aruse. Novenia's over. I am leafy, you're golden, so you called me. May me life, yea, you're golden. Sylvie me solve, exo geringer. You did so drool. I am so charm. But there's a great poet in you too. Stout Stokes would take you awfully. So has he as bored me to slump, but am good and rested. Tax to you, toddy tan ye. Ya ha ya wa wa. Help not to mine, help us vin. Here in your shirt, the day one, come back. The stock, your collar. Also your doubles brogus, a comforter as well. And here your involer and ever the less your umber. And stand up tall, straight. I want to see you looking fine for me, with your brand new big green belt and all, blooming in the very lotus and second to nil. Bud, when you're in the bulky shuit, Rosenshall Sharonol's near did for you. 57 and 3, Kosh, with the bulge. Proud purse Albee with his Poraroon Aaron, Thale, Pride, comf- Comfy Taousness, Envy. You make me think of a wonder deck I once, or some bolt thy sight, Sailder, the man me gallant with a bangled ears. Or an earl was he, at Lucian? Or no, it's the Iron Dukes I mean. Or some bray heirs from the dark countries. Come and let us. We always said we'd, and go abroad. Rathgrainy way perhaps, the child her are still fast. There is no school today. Them boys in so contrary. The head does be worrying himself. He'll troubled and he'll travel. Gulliver and Gulliver. Unless the changings by mistake, I see the likes in the twinkling of an eye. Some, so oft, sim, time after time. The sem asnu two breeder as Dofford as Norse and Sown. When one of him sighs and one of him cries, 'tis you all over. No peace at all. Maybe it's those two old crony aunts held them out to the waterfront. Queer Miss Quick Enough and odd Miss Don de Pebble. And when them two has had a good few, there isn't much more dirty clothes to publish. From the Laundersdale Menicians, old chap googling the Holy Boys thingabib, and this lad wedding his widow. You were pleased as Punch, reciting war's exploits and pierce orations to them jacking gapers. But that night after, all you were wanton, bidding me do this and that and the other, and blowing off to me hugely Judcius, what wouldn't you give to have a girl? You wish was me will, and lo, out of a sky, the way I too, but her, you wait, eager to choose is left for her shade. If she had only more matcher's wit, finelings make runaways, runaways astray. She's a merry as the Grick still. Twould be sore should laden sorrow. I'll wait, and I'll wait, and then if all goes, what will be is.
But let them, slops hosbotch and the slusky slut too. He's for thee what she's for me, dogging you round cove and haven and teaching me the perts of speech. If you spun your yarns to him on the swishbark waves, I was spelling my yearns to her over cottage cake. will not disturb their sleeping duties. Let besoms be bosuns, it's Phoenix, dear, and the flame is here. Let's our journey Saint O'Michael make it, since the loss of fire has lost, and the book of the depth is closed. Come, step out of your shell, hold up your free fing, yes, we've light enough. I won't take our laddie's lantern, for them 4 old windbags of gusts so fairy to be blowing at, nor you your rucksunk, to bring all the Danny Mans out after you on the hike. Send Arthur Giddis is sift, it is the softest morning that ever I can ever remember me. But she won't rain showerly, our Ilma, yet until it's the time, and me and you have made the sons of bursters one in the game. Still I'll take me old Finvara for my shoulders. The trout will be so fine at brookfished, with a taste of roly polleny from blood puddles after, to bring out the tang of the tay. Is it you fain for a roost brood? Oxmeal churn all out of the wool palls, and then all the chippy young cuppin jars cluttering round us, cluttering for their creams, crying me, grown-up sister, are me not truly? Little stonely, but there's a but, you must buy me a fine new girdle too, Nolly. When next you go to market Norwal, they're all saying I need it since the one from Isaacson slooped its line, nurk, fie, art thou come, give me your great bear's paw, patter of ilky foal, a miny tiny dola, mine nicey hensy in the languo flows, that's Jorgen Jargenson's. But you understood, notst? I always know by your brights and shades, reach down a little mo, so draw back your glaive, hot and hairy, hug on is your hand. Here's where the falskin begins, smooth as the infam's. One time you told you'd been burnt in ice, and one time it was chemicaled after you taking a likeness. Maybe that's why you hold your hod as if, and people thinks you miss the scaffold of fell design. I'll close my eyes so not to see, or see only a youth in his florizel, a boy in innocence peeling a twig, a child beside a weeny white steed. The child we all love to place our hope in forever. All men has done something. Be the time they've come to the weight of old fletch, we'll lave it so. We will take our walk before in the temple they ring the earthly bells, in the church by the hearse yard, Pax Goodman's will, or the birds start their tree-sturm shindy. Look, there are yours off, high on high, and world and couches. Sweet good luck, they're cawing you cool. You see they're as white as the riven snay for us. Next Peter's poll you will be elicited, or I'm not your illicitous bribe. The Kinsella woman's man will never reduce me. A McGareth O'Culloch go Merc McFuney, Suka doodling and sweep etch keeping round the lodge of Fionn Nagala of the trumpets. It's like potting the pro to sham on the dresser or tamming Uncle Tim's cobbin onto the brows of a vicar eagle. Not such big strides, huddy fuddy. You'll crush me antelopes I saved so long for their penisoles, and the 2 goodiest shoes. It is hardly a nut's mile or 7 possum bots. It is very good for the health of a morning, with bois, a gentle motion all around, as leisure paces, and the help yourself to a strool cures easy. It seems so long ago since, ages since, as if you had been long far away. Afar todays, a fear tonights, and me is with you in the dark. You will tell me some time if I can believe it's all. You know where I am bringing you? You remember when I ran bearing after hucks and haws, with you drawing out great aims to hazel me from the hummock with your sling, our cries. I could lead you there, and I still by you in bed. Lest Goduck to Dane Grevin knows, not a soul but ourselves, time, we have loads on our hangs.
Till Gilligan and Halligan call again to Hooligan, and the rest of the guns. Sulligan ate from left to right, Ollo Bobo, ye foxy thiegs. The Moscows thought to bawl you out, or the walled unicorn's master, bugly captain from the Knoll, drawls up by the door with the Honourable Wilp and the Reverend Pointer and the 2 lady pageants of Tullyhaw, Ballyhuntus, and in their riddle-tight raiding hats, for to lift a here's health to their robust, the stag, Evers the Carlton Hart. And you didn't host out with your duck and your duty, cap a pole, while they reach him the glass he never starts to finish. Clap this whiss on your pole, and stick this in your ear, Wiggly. Beauties don't answer, and the rich never pays. If you worthy and large, they'd hue and cry you Heathtown, Harperstown, Snowtown, Fornox, Flemingtown, Boatingtown, to the ford of Fine on Delvin. How they house you after the Platonic garlands. And all because, loosed in her reflexes, she's seen Eri Cory Com huntsome with his 3 poached dogs a-leashing him. But you came safe through. Enough of that horn a corner. And old Mother Goosip? We might call on the old lord. What do you say? There's something tells me he is a fine sport, like the score, and a mighty went before him, and a proper old promontory, his door always open for a new era's day, much as your own is. You invoiced him last Easter, so he ought to give us hot cockles and everything. Remember to take off your white hat, when we come in the presence and say, hoo-too-too, imusithuti, his is house of laws, and I'll drop my gracious curtsy too. If the Ming tongue no go bow to me homage, cow bow tow to the Mong tang. Ceremonialness to stand lowest place be, saying, what'll you take to link to light to pike on porpoise plays? He might knight you an armour else or daub you the first cheap magia strape. Remember bom thommernew, vim vam vom hungerig, hot form, chate and epilepts, bother bumbos, and I'll be your oral Inus. But we vain, plain fancies. It's in the castle's air. My current bread's full of silly motto craft. Aloof is a noof. We can take or leave. He's reading his roughs. You'll know our way from there, surely. Fleura's way. Where once we led so many car couples have followed since. Klatchka, giving Shaughnessy's mare the hilly mount of her life, with her stroll de burgers. The rollicky road a-dondering. We can sit us down on the heathery ben, me on you in qualm unconscience, to scan the arising, out from Drumleck. It was there Evora told me I had best, if I ever, when the moon of morning is set and gone over Glynaduna, Lono Nula, ourselves, our souls alone, at the sight of salvotion, and watch would the letter your wanting becoming may be, and cast ashore, that I praise for bemains of me dreams, scratching it and patching at with a prompt from a primer, and what scripts of nuts knowledges I pecked up myself. Every letter is a hard, but yours sure is the hardest crux ever. Hack and axe, hook and ox, hath and an, heth, hith, enses. But once done, dealt and delivered, tat-tat, you're on the map. Raised on tram scrap from Maston Boss, after rounding his world of ancient days, carried in caddy or screwed and corked on his mugis toss service, with a bob bottled by, blob. When the waves give up yours, the soil may for me. Sometime then, somewhere else, I wrote me hopes and buried the page when I heard thy voice, Ruddery Dunner, so loud that none but, and left it to lie till a Christmas coming. So content me now, this. Unbuild and be buildin' our bank-alone cottage there, and we'll cohabit respectable. The Gowans, sir, for Medam me. For acute buble run to her, for a pip-up and go-peep where the stirs be. Just to see would we hear how Jove and the peers talk, amid the soulness. Till top, big master, scale the summit. You're not so giddy any more. All your ground plotting and little it brought. Humps when you hized us and dumps when you doused us. But Sarah, one of me, cares a brambling ram pomp portiark. On limpity merge I've made me whom, park and a pub for me. Only don't start your stunts of Donachie's yards agoed again. I could guesp to her name who tucked you that one, tough nut, bold bed backwards, for the loves of Sinfintins before the naked universe.
And the bale by pleasure arm rinsing his eye. One of these fine days, Ludi cooler, you must redeform again. Bless shield, Martin, softly so. I am so exquisitely pleased about your loveliest dress I have. You will always call me leafiest, won't you, darling? Word hef hul, older hoy, and you won't herb junk to me perfume, oiled and cooloony, with a spot of Marischai. It's alpine smile from yester's late yeasters. I'm in the ever whence nostrils. even the host knows. Mederaskounding goodness, a stall of a stone, grand old marauder. If I knew who you are, when that hark from the air said it was Captain Finson makes come humlence and was Mayet pressing for his suit, I said, "You are there. Here's nobody here, only me." But I near fell off the pile of samples, as if your tinger winged ting to me here. It is that right what your brother Milk and Bay best telling the that district you were bragged by the Brustral because your parents would be always tumbling into his foul place and losing her Pentecosts after drinking their pledges? Howsoever endeavor you done me fine, the only man was ever known could eat the crust of lobsters. Our native night, when you twice took me for some Marion sherry, and then our German cousin with signs hers with X's and the beard wig I found in the Clarkson's bag. Ferreropus, you'll play you're the king of eye ships. You'll certainly make the most royal of noises. I will tell you all sorts of make-up things, strangerious, and show you to every simple story place we pass. Cad Miller's Folly, Bellavenue, Wellcrum, Quid Superabat, Vilitis Valitis. Change the plates for the next course of Murphy's. Loves still there and the cannon going strong, and so is Claffy's habits undertaking and our parish pomps a great warrant. But you'll have to ask that same for that named them is always snugging in your bar salooners, saying they're the best relics of Connolly O'Daniel and writing Finglass since the flood. There'll be some kingly work in progress, but it's by this route he'll come some morrow. And I can signal you all Flint and Fern are wrestling as we go by. And you'll sing thumb a bit and then wise your Selman on it. It is all so often and still the same to me. Snuff, only tough, wick dear. Clane tough. You've never forgotten bat or on taff, have you? At Brian Borough, what? Mitch. Why, them's the mushrooms come up during the night. Look, aggress the roofs in parishes. Dom on dam, uh, dam on dam, dim and dam. In a capital part of Olympics to play at. Stadion Colossus. Mind you stride or you'll knock. While I'm dodging the dustbins, look what I found. A lentil pea. And look at here. This cara we seed. Pretty mites, my sweet things. Was thy poor lovers abandoned by holy whitey world? Neighbor lots for Newtown. The Ablanamanga you be haze held lumining up out of the Dumblinas. But the still Sama Sitta I've lapped so long, as you said, it fair takes. If I lose my breath for a minute or two, don't speak. Remember, once it happened, so it may again. Why, I'm all these years within years in Sofran, all believed to hide away the tear, the parted. It's thinking of all, the brave that gave there, the fair that wore, all them that's goony. It I'll begin again in a jiffy. The nick of a nad. How glad you'll be I waked you. My, how well you'll feel. Forever after. First we turn by the Vagron here, and then it's Gooter. So side by side, turn a gate, wedding town, lawn men, lawn dub, the only hope whole the heaven sees us. For I feel I can near to faint away into the deeps, Anamor's leap. Let me lean just a lee, if a bold, strong, big tilder. All girls is way at times. So while you've adamant Evra whips that wind as if out of nowhere, as on the night of the as on the night of the Apophenia jumps, shoots, throps into the mouth like a bogue and oros. Ludgood of the lash lanes, how he whips me cheeks. See, see, here, we're reach, island, bridge, we, where you meet I, the day. Remember, why there the moment in us two only? I was but teen, a tiller's dot.
The swanky suits was boosting always. Sure him, he was like to me fad, but the swaggerest swell off shackful strut, and the fiercest freaky ever followed a pining child round the sluppery table with a forkful of fat. But a king of whistlers, Sioula, when he'd prop me up Atlas against his goose and light our two candles for our singers' duos on the sewing machine. I'm sure he squirted juice in his eyes to make them flash for flightening me. Still in all, he was awful fond to me. Who'll search for find me colors now on the hilly droops of Wicklow fells? But I read in to be continued's tale that while bluebells blows, there'll still be sealskers. There'll be others, but none so for me. Yet he never knew we seen us before, night after night, so that I longed to go to, and still withal. One time you'd stand forninst me, fairly laughing, in your bark and tan billows of branches for to fan me coolly, and I'd lie as quiet as a moss, and one time you'd rush upon me, darkly roaring, like a great black shadow with a sheeny stare to purse me rawly, and I'd frozen up and pray for thaw 3 times in all. I was the pet of everyone then, a principal girl, and you were the panty mammy's vulking coarse gruff. The envision of Indoland, and by Thoror you looked it. My lips went livid for from the joy of fear. Like almost now, how you said how you'd give me the keys of me heart, and we'd be married till death do us part. And though dev do us part, oh mine, only know now it's me who's got to give, as Dove herself div in this lin. And can it be it's now Forval? Alas, I wished I had better glances to peer to you through this baylight's growing. But you're changing, Akulsha. You're changing from me, I can feel. Or is it me I'm getting mixed, brightening up and tightening down. Yes, you're changing, son husband, and you're turning, I can feel you, for a daughter wife from the hills again. Imlamaya, and she is coming, swimming in my hind moist, divil taking on me tail, just a whisk, brisk, sly, spry, spink, spank, sprint of a thing there so mere saltering. Saltarella come to her own. I pity your old self I was used to. Now a younger's there. Try not to part. Be happy, dear ones, may I be wrong, for she'll be sweet for you as I was sweet when I came down out of me mother. My great blue bedroom, the air so quiet, scarce a cloud, in peace and silence. I could have stayed up there for always only. It's something fails us. First we feel, then we fall. And let her reign now if she likes, gently or strongly as she likes. Anyway, let her reign now, for my time is come. I done me best when I was let, thinking always if I go, all goes. 100 cares, a tithe of troubles, and is there one who understands me? One 1,000 of years of the nights. All me life I have been lived among them, but now they are becoming loath to me, and I am loathing their little warm tricks, and loathing their mean cozy turns, and all the greedy gushes out through their small souls, and all the lazy leaks down over their brash bodies. How small it's all, and me letting on to meself always, and lilting on all the time. I thought you were all glittering with the noblest of carriage. You're only a bumpkin. I thought you the great in all things, in guilt and in glory. You're but a puny. Home, my people were not their sort out beyond there so far as I can. For all the bold and bad and bleary they are blamed, the sea hags. No, nor for all our wild dances and all their wild din. I can see meself among them, all in Uvia Polk rebelled, how she was handsome, the wild Amazia, when she would seize to my other breast, And what is she weird, haughty no luna, that she will snatch from my ownest hair? For 'tis they are the stormies, ho hang, hang ho, and the clash of our cries till we spring to be free. Our avoles, they says, never heed of your name, but I'm loathing them that's here and all I loathe, loonly in me loneness, for all their faults I am passing out. Oh, bitter ending, I'll slip away before they're up. They'll never see, nor know, nor miss me. And it's old and old, it's sad and old. It's sad and weary, I go back to you, my cold father, my cold mad father, my cold mad fiery father, till the near sight of the mere size of him, the moils and moils of it, moanoning makes me sea silt salt sick, and I rush my only into your arms. I see them rising, save me from those terrible prongs. Two more, 1, 2 more men's more. So, Ave Laval, my leaves have drifted from me, all, but one clings still. I'll bear it on me, to remind me of, oof, so soft this morning ours. Yes, carry me along, Taddy, like you done through the toy fair. If I seen him bearing down on me now under white spread wings like he'd come from archangels, I think I'd die down over his feet, humbly dumbly, only to wash up. Yes, Tid.
There's where, first, we pass through grass, behush the bush, to wish a gull. Gulls, far calls, coming, far, end here. Us then, Finn again, take, bustle he, memor me, till thousand thee, lips, the keys to, given. Away, alone, a last, a loved, along the Oh, I'm quite emotional.
We did it.
We did it. We did it. We did it. We've all done it.
You know what, Neil? I'm with you. Those last 10 pages are kind of astounding. And then to read that first sentence again. It's funny because like when we got to the last, page and a half, I was like, I felt like there was a pleading to go back to the dream. It's like I'm waking up, I'm realizing how much is changing around me and I don't want it to. So just let me sleep again.
Yeah.
Which is just, yeah.
Yeah, it's that pain and the beauty side by side, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the moment she goes into that, like that line of that transitional line for that last long, stretch with, and she's about fed it up now with noncery reams, right? And, it's like this, they're talking about just the different ways to read the line, right? Like, obviously we have fed up with the noncery rhymes, but then the noncery reams, like the larger books, and let's face it, the noncery reams, the sexual things that come from that, it's like she's done, right? Like it's like that sense of it, and then she's done, and then yet as she's done, she recaps all of this, and I don't know, I'm sure like this is where that thing of we talked about earlier, the open heart and the open mind. Like if it may be tough going to get into that, but like as you hear her go through that, like it can't help but like connect to certain elements of your own way of thinking of the world, other people's, I don't know. To me, it's just there's that universe,
and it certainly makes sense as to why people get to the end and then start back over again, because you've got your tools now, and now you feel much more equipped to get back into the beginning and take more out of it. But yeah, it's that circularity. I mean, it's one of those, obviously, what you take away from it in lots of different ways, and you can take so many different things away. I mean, obviously, I'm in a situation right now that you were in a couple of years ago, Neil, where my son is getting ready to go off to college in a couple, he's not 18 months away. Your son has just gone off to college, and that circularity of life, of you raise the children so that they'll leave, and dealing with my parents and their health and all of those kinds of things. It really brings it all home. And like I said, it made me quite emotional getting toward the end there, because I've taken this opportunity to build this podcast and bring all the people I love into underneath the banner of what this is, so that I have a record, so that I have recordings of all of my family and all of my friends and all of the people reading this thing, which is a life. And it's something that I'll treasure when I'm, in years to come, the fact that we have this document and getting a chance to sort of see the momentum that ALP has toward the end there, of the river rushing toward the sea, and the fact that you can't stop it, much like you can't stop age, life, children growing up, people dying. It's beautiful.
I love. There's a couple lines that I was like, yeah, that's great. Like, time, we have loads on our hang till Gilligan and Halligan call again to hooligan. This idea of like, yeah, we'll spend time together until someone asks me to do something, which is really. But also the clash of our cries till we spring to be free is fantastic. And one time you'd rush upon me, darkly roaring like a great black shadow with a sheeny stare to pierce me rawly. I was like, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at, because there's one way, like as you read, even if you just isolate the last couple of pages, where one could almost cynically say, well, okay, but here, this language is not nearly as difficult as a lot of the language in the text, right? Like, you could look at it like that and be like, why couldn't he have done this the whole way through, right? Or something like this, right? Which is like, but it's so clear as you go, like, but the whole point is that it's earned.
Yes.
And like, this is that thing of like, if you're interested in a book, if you're interested in a world where you get these one-to-one, this is the way you want it to look like. And, we live in a world where you can pretty much get hand-delivered however you want to think about things, right? Like, you can literally get the affirmation of whatever certainty you have or people you want. Like, so this is not that book, right? Like, this is like, you can try to say, even like people I really respect as like reader, like someone like Nabokov hated this, right? And like, there are people, and like, I feel they were just really wrong. Like, and I don't know if there's a little like, and I totally get it when someone's frustrated with this. Is I'm not a snob. Like, I totally see the challenge, but like, what I guess I bristle at is this idea of like thinking he was doing it as a kind of joke, or like, or even if he was like, I mean, there's always a piece where like, yeah, you're playing with things, but like, that deep down, the goal was like the ultimate goal of a writer, which is to try to understand the world. Like, to me, that is the burning desire that runs through this. And the reason it does kind of gain this clarity and greater simplicity at the end is because she and he and the work and the world has to work through. The truth is hard. The truth is hard, right? And like, I think that if you try to get that shortcut, if you try, you will always find people who will provide them for you. You will never lack for people selling you some version of a truth. But like, the ones that work are the ones that you gotta earn.
Yeah. Can I say that this all came, the earning of it all came into clarity for me on page 621 near the bottom, where they are talking about where she's looking at the boy outside playing with a stick, and she just says, the child we all love to place our hopes in forever, all men has done something. Like, this idea of like, hopefully the next generation will break whatever cycle that we just spent 600 pages exploring, right? But that boy out there, he could be different, and I love that so much.
And the pain of knowing that we're going to go back, right? That's where it's so like, this is why like irony is such a misunderstood notion, because primarily because we've lumped it into with sarcasm, which is like deathly problematic. But like, it's being able to manage and house these sort of like conflicting truths in the same brain space, right? So it's a great thing you pointed out there, TJ, just because it ties in, like, we all know that, like, that the child, like, it's all, whether it's our own children or like we think about ourselves when we were younger or other people's children, and then like all, like the guilt piece of the all men has done something, but like the hope, and the hope is true, and also the reality that like it's going to be the same anew, right? There's that the same anew is in here too, right? That like that phrase that Beckett picks up on. It's like, we're not going to find nirvana. Like, but we're going to keep like
Trying.
we're going to keep trying. I mean, that's the pain. The pain is the hope, right? And like, and this it's endlessly frustrating about a world where we sell people pictures of a dreamscape, right? In which doesn't involve these contradictions and this internal and external and interpersonal, all those struggles, all those realities are so, it's actually not even true to call them complex. It's like, it's multiple simplicities that are added up into a world that leads to a kind of complexity, but like there's clarity, but the moment you try to, I don't know.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. This is why you write this, if you can, rather than just talk about it. But I mean, you need both, I guess. But
well, and I love your suggestion of nirvana in the idea that, in terms of the idea of meditation, that you can't find clarity. You can't go get clarity. You have to find it. You have to earn your way towards it. You have to build towards it. You have to be open-minded. You have to be ready to receive it. And I don't know if anyone's ever read Finnegans Wake all the way through, fighting against it as a, being skeptical of what Joyce is trying to do. I think you have to be open to it. And all the critiques that came out in 1939, the ones that so dispirited Joyce, were by skeptical reviewers who were ready to hate it and then were vindicated, because they say, oh, well, I was ready to hate it. I started off by hating it. I continued hating it. And by the end, I hated it. And whereas that openness has to be part of that conversation. It's like you've said, like how do you define Finnegans Wake? And you can't. And it's that openness of allowing it to happen to you that is what brings us to this reward at the end, where you go, do you see what's happening? And we cycle back again. And it's not just a trick or a gimmick that Joyce is saying, hey, because the idea that the last line is the first line is generally the first thing that anyone, after the thunder words, it's the next thing people say. Oh, and it begins in the middle of a sentence, as though it's some kind of gimmick. But it's
as
much
opposed to giving it the literary weight that it holds of like, what is the meaning of it? It's it's the same thing that I tell my students in script analysis class, or I'm just like, but trust that the thing is there for a reason, as opposed to trying to dismiss it just because you don't understand it, right? And the end actually reminded me. I got the same feeling the first time I like understood why people still produce Endgame. Like I forget, it was that first. Bear with me. The first like really big monologue from the character who's blind. I cannot remember his name to save my life. But that first big monologue, I remember the first time I saw it. Right, I was like, oh, this is what it's about for me. Right, something shifted in the presentation of it that said, oh, this opens up for me in a completely different way. And I think that, I think that people they approach this, like you said, Neil. If they don't approach it with an open mind and an open heart, like you said, Toby, I can go into anything that people love, and if I said I'm choosing to hate it, of course I can nitpick it to death, right? But the thing that we have just done is allowed ourselves to experience it, right? And there's very few novels that you experience.
Yes.
There's a lot of novels that you're there for, like, what's the plot? There are very few novels that you experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think of the conversation that we had the last time you were on, Neil, when you said you were quoting Albee when you were saying, what's it about? It's about 2 hours. Or what is Finnegans Wake? It's about what is Finnegans Wake about? It's about 628 pages. Stop trying to figure out what it's about. Tyndall. I mean, I did a bit of research and I grabbed a couple of quotes in relation to this. Tyndall says his quote is, "Finnegans Wake is about Finnegans Wake," and it's that simple, is that you can't reduce it much more than that, because it's about everything and also nothing. Benstock said, quote, "A work of literary art cannot be paraphrased, since paraphrase is a method of reducing a work into something else, and in the case of The Wake, it often proves to be reducing towards absurdity," which feels a lot like what we spend a lot of time trying to break it down. And then another thing that Benstock says, I've got a third one here, when he says, when otherwise competent Joyceans quibble about how many hours of Finnegans Wake, 1,000 or 100, make a real Finnegans Wake reader, they are taking away valuable time from the angels dancing on the head of the pin controversy. A Finnegans Wake reader is not measured by time spent, but by intelligence and information contributed towards an understanding of the work. Again, a direct shot across the bow at the purists. And also at the haters.
Yeah, and even like it's interesting thinking of, because this is the trap, right? It's like, because sometimes you can hear someone say, and I totally see the truth of the line, it's a Finnegans Wake is about Finnegans Wake. Okay, but I still think you don't want to get into the trap of, okay, well, therefore it's in this kind of like bubble thing, right? Because it's actually, I would say it's the mirror up to nature, right? Like, I'm not saying those are even two contradictory things. I'm just saying that, like, partly you're trying, when you talk about it in some way, you have to think about, who am I talking to about it, right? Because there's that you're trying to engage, you kind of figure out what the level someone has with it in order to get them to read a little more. Or like connecting to TJ's line about the end, like there's this this kind of, I could definitely see how this may have influenced like the way I thought about Grenadine at the end, like the creating of, because the way it ends with, it's like, let's face it, she's probably died, right? Like, or at some world, like she's walked under. The reason why she stops off in the middle of that sentence is because she drowned, right? At the same time, we know that we might very much be in a dream landscape, in which case this may be part of, simply not like in an escape sense, but like literally the night reality of the world. But then connecting to the beginning, it's both there's the sense in which it's over, but then which it's becoming. And so there's like reality and illusion sort of tension. And the reason I mentioned like how it, when anyone asks me, what's the end of Grenadine? Do the friends really come back? I'm like, well, let's face it, Pix drowned, right? He's gone. Like they looked for him. He didn't like magically find like a place to breathe, like some scuba equipment somewhere, right? Like he's gone. His friends, he pushed them. It's the most likely thing is that Prismatic has been taught by his friends to finally imagine their presence, and he now it's like the way one taps into like friendships they had when they were younger, people who were gone, but they still need to draw on that strength to like go on. So it's very real in the sense that he's tapping into that, but they're also gone. But like, would a stage direction work there? Actually, they're not really like that. No, it's like what you're basically inviting is like the bothness of it. And the fact that you can be so caught up in a world where you're imagining something to be real that it can very much be hard to figure out if it's not real or not real, especially if we're dealing with like ideation and stuff like that, right? So you want to really find ultimately a way to inhabit that space. It's not about a lack of clarity, or the writer doesn't have a decision here to make, or it's none of those things. It would be like Joyce putting in brackets at the end here, well, by the way, this is now going to continue at the beginning, and then we're also going to like, I don't know that anything he could say there would actually work, right? It wouldn't work. And it's not because he lacks clarity, it's because that there is an attempt to understand the multivalence of human existence, right?
Yeah. And that's why we rail against the existence of these summary sections in the Oxford World Classics, which we've been making fun of a lot the last few weeks, because it does remove a lot of that nuance, and it sort of tries to make unambiguous the ambiguous or the universal, and that's the issue we have. I found this great quote from Benstock. This is in Joyce Again's Wake. He says, "Short digests of the most important events in each chapter have the pitiful quality of giving us the impression that the commentators, like Aesopian blind men, were reading three different books, all oddly enough entitled Finnegans Wake."
Yeah.
and so that idea of trying to break things down, and we'll go through the Oxford World Classics in summary for the last time ever in a moment. But yeah, it just feels so counterintuitive to what this is. It feels like, yeah. Go on.
Can I offer something? So, a student brought this to me a couple days ago, and I've been really sitting with it, and it's kind of blown my mind open. But there's this essay by a gentleman named Jeffrey Jerome Cohen called "Monster Culture or Seven Theses," right? And it basically says how like really impactful art is like an assimilation of a whole bunch of ideas, and they're kind of like monsters, and they show up, and there's these seven theses about how these monsters interact with society. But the seventh thesis, the last one I want to share, because it feels like it sums up what Finnegans Wake does, at least for me. It's thesis 7: the monster stands at the threshold of becoming. This thing of darkness I acknowledged mine. Monsters are our children. They can be pushed to the farthest margins of geography and discourse, hidden away at the edges of the world and in the forbidden recesses of our mind, but they always return. And when they come back, they bring not just a fuller knowledge of our place in history and the history of knowing our place, but they bear self-knowledge, human knowledge, and a discourse all the more sacred as it arises from the outside. These monsters ask us how we perceive the world, how we have misrepresented what we have attempted to place. They ask us to reevaluate our cultural assumptions about race, gender, sexuality, our perception of differences, our tolerance towards its expression. They ask us why we have created them. And this feels like it sums up the novel for me.
Yeah, that's a good touch point. I can totally hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
especially when Oxford tries to define it.
Right,
it's
right.
Like it almost feels like the definition is shifting. So putting it down on paper feels like a moot point.
Yeah, and it's a thankless task for the editor to try to, because obviously Oxford, if they're going to publish it, they're like, well, you need to put notes in because otherwise people won't understand or people won't buy the book. So I feel for the editor who's been asked to come up with. I mean, it says on the very first line in the Penguin that we're reading in the introduction, it says the first thing to say about Finnegans Wake is that it is in an important sense unreadable. Which, Neil, you may.
He's off to a bad start already.
I mean, it's
that's the thing. If he had just said, look, there's a summary that's helpful. Sometimes it helps to have the summary. Here it is. This is inefficient, but insufficient, but go for it. I mean, that would have been a much better opening for him.
Yeah, I think he's trying to sort of reassure us to please keep reading, or if you pick this up in a bookstore, then don't put it back down again. Really would love you to buy it. But yeah, I mean, I think if you get a scholar who's been asked to summarize Finnegans Wake, if they come back to the editor and say, sorry, that's not how that works, then they'll go, okay, we'll move on to the next person who can do it. So someone's got to do it. And we have been talking about the Oxford World Classic. Let me finally, and the really interesting thing is when I pulled up the Oxford World Classic summary for the sections for this one, there was at the very end 2 initials, FF, and I was like, oh, this was written by someone. It wasn't just a generated thing that's part of a collective creation thing. So Finn Fordham, I apologize for our making fun of you, but at the same time, you had, you're
the
on
impossible task.
Impossible task. You're on a hiding to nothing. So I don't know if anyone could have done better than you did. But FF, yes, we're still. It's like a friend of mine studied under Jacques Lecoq in Paris, and he would perform a scene for him, and then they would come and look at him, and Lecoq would say, "We can say everything, so we say nothing," which is the pretty hard thing to hear as an actor when you say, oh, I've got so much to say that I may as well say nothing. So I feel as though maybe we could have asked the same of Finn Fordham, but here is what he says. This is, let's follow the line and page numberings conventional to this text for the very last time, and then we're never going to speak of it again. We started on page 613-13, so 613-13 to 614-16. Despite this major conversion, nothing really changes. See, Lawrence O'Toole welcomes Henry II. 613-17 to 614-18. A cleansing is encouraged of insides with cereal, emetics, etc., and outside clothing. Advice to dress sharp for the day. 614-19 to 615-11. But what was that all about? It was a complex process designed so it can all be there for you. 6:15:13 to 6:19:19, the letter is finally produced. Is this at last the revelation? It reveals ALP's statement against the allegations aimed at her husband, and on 6:17, her desire for revenge. At 6:19, she confirms her faith in her husband as erect, confident, and heroic. Then 6:19 to 20 to 6:28 to the end. By contrast, the spoken monologue of Leafy or ALP that follows offers an alternative and seems more revelatory. A meditation on life as she addresses her husband soothingly, and at 6:27:23 dismissively, I thought you the great in all things, in guilt and in glory, you're but a puny. It is finally as she flows out to sea a death aria. Remember me, she sings Memory 6:28:14, which we do by returning to the beginning, where we find the river is still running through the city of Dublin. FF. So that's the Oxford World Classics. I don't know. I liked our discussion of it better.
I do like the idea of her being like, "Hey, I'm done with you. I'm gonna end my own life, but like that boy's the future. I thought you were great. You're really not. Peace out." Like,
yeah, and returning to my father, the ocean.
Yeah, I'd rather be there than with you.
And there's also the sense, though, that like it could be him thinking that this is what she's thinking, right? The pain of that, right? That this, like, that's like the like the fact that this is like where I think and Joyce writing this, right, about his own, like, he's the one who he himself was I great in all things and good, but I'm not, like, it's how small it's all, right? Like he writes this thing and then the critics come out and say, so it's like there's so many things going on here. At once. Like, again, it's like, and that's why, let's, like, poor FF, right? He had a gig to do. He did it's like someone who's put in charge of, like, coming up with Shakespeare summaries, who may even think, okay, I'm not going to paraphrase all this stuff because I know it's like you're ruining it the moment you paraphrase it. But, I got a job to do. I'm being asked to do something. I'm going to do it. Like, there's nothing wrong. I mean, inherently wrong with any of these things. It's just that, like, it's only if you isolate it as the entry point, right? And just to give FF a break.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Joyce, I think once he gets into his full flow at the end of this chapter, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was creating. He knew he was nearing greatness, or he was.
I would say the probably knew that all along.
I think so, but it's one of the, I mean, I think the fact that he didn't really accept any notes as he went. I mean, people were criticizing him, and they published the examination in defense, and there was all the critiques of all of the released segments, but he wasn't discouraged. He didn't quit. He just continued going. And so by the end, on 6:25, he says, that'll be some kingly work in progress. He's very clearly talking about himself. He knows what he's doing here. And it's got to be, I mean, I don't want to open old wounds, Neil, but I mean, you are, as a playwright, a wonderful, brilliant playwright who writes difficult stuff. You get to the end of Grenadine, you win the Yale Prize, you get the attention of Albie and all that kind of stuff, but yet the world hasn't fated you the way that it probably should have. I mean, it's got to feel very like that sort of parallel to how Joyce felt at the end of this, where he thought, I'm creating greatness, I can feel it coming off my pen, and then people don't understand, or it's too hard. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even want to go there, but I mean, but it yeah, I mean, I think he knew it worked, and, like, yeah, I mean, I think the problem with that is, of course, that's probably true of hundreds of thousands of, like, right, how many people would say, like, oh yeah, I know this is great, it's just that the world is saying it's not, right? And, like, it's like, oh, well, I mean, after a while you hear enough people say that, and then you, like, read what they've written, like, well, I think in your particular case this doesn't apply, right? So, like, how do we, again, but this goes back to, I think, TJ's point about how it's this idea of when we teach something, the way we've gone about teaching things now, we've also moved, because we know the element of the subjective when it comes to literary criticism, right? We know there's an element of the subjective, and we know that it's easier to fall into these categories of, does it make money? Does it appeal to this audience group? We know
100%.
all this stuff, but like there's nothing we can really do to like without coming out and saying something hurtful to someone. And like you can say, oh well, just be hurtful. Why? Like there's no point in it. Like in the end, you can't create an audience. I mean, you can certainly create an audience built around marketing, right? But you can't create an audience built around like, you know, there's got to be a groundswell for more of the sort of true attachments to something, right? You just can't force it. Like, and there's nothing. So there's really nothing to be done on that front. I don't know. So I've yes, it does bring back some old pain of like thinking, knowing in some level that you've done something, and there's a certain amount of affirmation around it, but at some point you also just run into enough walls with it, and then you can't keep going back to the same place, right? Because you know that all the actual talking points are, you know, they run into a wall, right?
Yeah, I think it's the reminder. I often have to remind my young writers, especially because I teach at a university that is all about putting people in the industry, air quotes, whatever the industry is, right? And the especially writers, they're like, I have to figure out what my brand is. And I was like, you are an author, not a brand, right? Who you are and what you write will change over time. And if you are saying, I only write like angsty teenagers dealing with adult things, like, guess what? That's going to run its course very quickly, right? You need to be able to be confident enough in what you're doing to have someone be attached to that thing and like that thing. And hopefully, obviously, we all want to make money, and like, because we need money to live, because we're in post-capitalistic society, blah, 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 right? But I think what you're saying, Neil, is that like, it really is about, you have to trust the work to do what the work is going to do, right? And hope that people see that. And if people don't see that, I espouse the greatness of Grenadine, and I will until the day I die. It's probably going to be on my tombstone. I'll be like, read this play if you haven't. And then everyone I hand it to, I'm like, this is fantastic. They're like, this is fantastic, and I'm like, great. This is what it's about to me, right?
At the same time, I mean, like, I appreciate it. I love it. I mean, it means so much.
But you can't
But at
revel
the same
in it,
time,
right?
these kids are absolutely right that it comes down to their brand. Like, I mean,
100%.
that's the problem. The problem is there's no way around this, right? We've created a world where theater companies that will say whatever they want about what they really want to produce, in the end, their brains are around the brands, right? So it's like, and their audiences don't want to say that they think that, but this is so again, but like there's no way to even come out and what do? Put a blog post about this? Like there's no outlet for, you're doing absolutely the right thing to try to get them to trust the work. It's like if someone gives you something to read, you can only do whatever you can to try to figure out what they're trying to do and help them
100%.
grow, right? That's all you can do. But at the same time, there's this emptiness because you feel like it's totally pointless because they're not even given, like, maybe like 20, I don't know, like now at this, it's probably much harder now than it even was for us. We felt it as as our age group felt it. We kind of felt it coming on. I mean, we even heard stuff about, like, I mean, again, when I went to my agent was like, Harold Bloom just called me on the phone to say I'm a playwright of extraordinary dramatic power. And my agent was like, that and 50 cents won't get you a subway ticket in New York. And I was like, okay, well, like, I mean, at some point you're not even, it doesn't even become, it does like, because then of course, well, what is Harold Bloom? Like, you know, like you can always undercut something. And even what you said, like, I could go to people like, well, actually, it's not just like Bloom and all. Be like, you know, it's taught in these places and kids like, you know, like no one cares. Like none of it adds up to anything. Like, and so you can, obviously it's not that it doesn't matter to me, but it's just like, what am I going to do? Like, I mean, you can't manufacture it. So it's just,
even if you are a brand, you're judged on the last thing that you created. So like,
right. No, that's the thing too. It's not like the people who live by that rule and even are rewarded by that rule. it's not a good path forward. Like, I don't think we're in a particularly good path forward by doing it, but like we've gone down the road so long. So maybe our world has gotten, I think the only hope that I have for it, and this is not just for me, but for how we think about these things, is that like maybe we've gotten to a point where eventually it just, you do hit a kind of like, and honestly, I think AI is that point, because ultimately it's like, oh, all you artists railing against AI, well, guess what? You brought it on because you basically said, like, Hollywood railing against AI has to be the most hypocritical thing imaginable, because they basically brought us the idea that what sells is more important than the thing itself. And
Right.
anything that they say that goes against that, any actor who goes against that, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't only work for $20 million on a project, because if you do that, you're aligning with what sells, right? And you can say, oh,
100%.
well, what I'm working on, this is a masterpiece. Well, fine, you can do whatever you want, but like to basically to yell at AI, it's like gosh, like you're basically its patron saint, and now you're saying it's this evil thing. Like, so that to me, like that's the one thing. Like, it could be so bad now with AI that maybe younger people will actually be like, now's the tipping point.
I can tell you that I'm seeing that in at least in my classrooms, that there are like that I have this project every year where I'm like, you have to create a theater company, you have to plan a season. And 4 years ago, they were like traditional seasons. And I can tell you now, every company is like, it's cross collaborative, devised, or new work, period. And I'm like, heard.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're trying to find the people. They're even saying like, if this play has had more than 3 productions, we ain't doing it, because this is building up a lot. They're like, it's building into the system, and I'm seeing that like active in real time, and it's really encouraging.
All right.
Hope for the future. Hope for the future.
Oh, that's right. We're back to Finnegans Wake, right?
Yeah.
The child in which
yeah.
we put all our
Yes.
hopes in forever.
That's it. That's it. Look, we're running out of time, so but I want to thank Neil. I mean, what's next for you? What are you working on at the moment? What's exciting in Wechsler world?
Well, I am, so I did mention that I am doing something with some students at UB in terms of this Grenadine VR idea, which is both with students in the theater department and in the media studies department, which is exploring this idea of what it would be like to do a play in VR, which, I think probably the disorientation that comes with watching a play in VR will probably eliminate any path forward. But what's been really cool about it is seeing all the educational aspects of it. I think to TJ's point earlier, like the siloed aspect of theater is problematic. So one way we can tap into to these technologies is how to connect different groups of people around the world around interesting types of projects. And even like the actors are getting a ton out of it, about thinking about like how their performance shifts, and not only how it would work in VR, because maybe there'll never be a VR performance, but even how thinking about the media affects then how you think about your performance. And like, am I presenting this to someone in the back row, or like, how you actually think about that. So all the grammar is really cool. But most of the work I do these days is in consulting, which I've actually enjoyed quite a bit, with mostly with businesses. This is sort of navigating the new world of, I think on the one hand, we hear people who are just saying efficiency at all costs, and then the other people, let's tear down the infrastructure at all costs. And it's like, well, neither of those paths are good, right? Because it's like you've got to find businesses that can create good things for people in communities, grow like the new. So it's really fun for me to work. It's sort of this has been building for years now, partly because of I was, the working within theater, alt world education, it started to dry up a little bit. So moving out into this area, and I'm really enjoying.
And your consulting stuff, do you do remote stuff for people who aren't local to you, or is it mostly Buffalo?
Absolutely. And I'm actually something I can't talk about quite yet, but I'm one of the guys I do a lot of consulting with. We're working on something to do even more of that, to sort of consolidate a lot of the stuff we do. So
that's awesome.
I will have a note for the two of you shortly about that. But yes, so it's very much remote. Most of the work I do with clients is just like this.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're an arts leader, and clearly you're impressed by Neil's take on the world, because we're always impressed every time Neil opens his mouth, reach out to wechslerprojects.com. I'll link to that in the show notes. You'd be lucky to have Neil in one of your Zoom meetings to talk to you about the state of the world, because he's full of more ideas and schemes and plans than anyone I've ever met, and I love it. And it's one of the things I admire most about him. So we're just thrilled to have you here for the last reading episode, and to get you get a chance to read your favorite section, which was a real pleasure. But that is all the time we have this week for Wake. So cue closing time, because we've done it. We've read Finnegans Wake out loud just once. We're going to be true to our word about that just once, and aside from a couple more summary bonus episodes, this is the official end to our reading. I want to thank my partner in crime, TJ Young, for encouraging me and urging me down this long and winding path. Thank you, TJ. I love you. I couldn't have done it without you.
Of course, anytime. Love you too.
It's been wonderful. I also want to thank all of our incredible guests over the last year. 33 people from our worlds and the world of Joyce have joined us on multiple episodes, led by the record holder for the most guest appearances, Neil Wechsler. So thank you, Neil, for being here. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, guys. It's been so much fun.
With more than a little bit of wistful emotion that I sign off, I've been Toby Malone, joined as ever by TJ Young, and keep an eye out for occasional bonus episodes and maybe a new project altogether. Maybe TJ and I will come up with something else. I probably will. So we'll see you in next week's summary chapter, completists, because guess what? You have now finished reading Finnegans Wake. This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Perso Riley, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.